All right, all right, all right. Welcome. What up, and welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen. All right, let's finish this video up real quick. You know what I'm saying? And, you know what I mean? Like, yo, tell me what y'all think about my background, because I kind of, I kind of like what I'm doing here. So let's rock and roll.
Last question. Do you think India may actually stand to gain from a collaborative relationship with China? You've spoken of their expected precipitous demographic slide. Can India use Chinese capital and open the Indian market to them and get to a win-win relationship with our neighbor? Hypothetically, will such a collaboration be viewed with caution by the US and the West?
I don't think the United States is going to be too worried about that. We're coming to the conclusion in the United States that the Chinese story really is overblown. That's starting to kind of seep into the edges of American consciousness. It's certainly the dominant strain driving the Chinese right now. So there is one part where I don't think I'd use the word collaboration, but where India can certainly take advantage. Capital flight from China is already at epic levels, in excess of $1 trillion US a year. So you've got Chinese citizens who realize that their situation is on the edge and they're looking to put their money anywhere else. India is as good of a location for that as any, if there are sufficient investment vehicles to be used. And there's any number of methods that India could use to take advantage of that. State of California, United States is kind of the gold standard in how to attract Chinese capital flight, for example. But in terms of broader cooperation, every country that has tried that, it's gone badly. The Chinese bring in their own.
Well, let me say this, right? And this is important to understand about American investment from China. Because oftentimes I hear a lot of guys like, Chinese are buying up farmland, or Chinese are buying up this, or Chinese are buying up this. Look, all right, anything that the Chinese can't take home is fine. Like, legitimate, like, yo, if they can't take it home with them, right? In the end of the day, like, you can't take home a farm. You can't take home a port. You can't take home, a factory. Like, you just can't do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't take home real estate. In the end of the day, like, if somebody wants to invest in your real estate, they want to buy like a house or a condo or whatever the case is, they're not going to take it apart and ship it back. Right. And if they do, then they're dumb. You know what I'm saying? Because like, it's going to cost more to like move it than it would to like just own it, gain the value, and then sell it, whenever the case might be, and then put it into some other type of, investment vehicle. That's important to understand as a whole. So like, we need to stop being scared of these type of things about, foreign investment, because foreign investment is not a bad thing. Yes, it can cause asset bubbles and cause rising prices. Because like, again, I'm saying, like, inflation is always caused by demand. Like, it is what it is. You can't cause inflation by supply. So, well, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Workers to do the infrastructure. The Chinese do it with their own money, or they charge loans, and then you get left with something you might not necessarily need on the back end. Every state that has participated in the Belt and Road Initiative has, in the end, ultimately repudiated the debts. And the Chinese idea of a joint venture is, how about you pay for everything and we take all your technology?
Did you know that the average adult has 5 to 20 pounds of toxic poop in their body at any given moment? Seems crazy, right?
If India can break the...
Apparently we have toxic poop. I had no idea we had toxic poop. Like, that's fucking bananas. Let's keep going now.
The mold and make that relationship work, India would be the first country to do so. So honestly, I would focus your energies elsewhere.
We at least convinced them to take on a religion for a long time. With that, I think I'll open it to the audience for some questions, if any. Yeah.
Hi, Peter. Mihir here from Times Network. Your ideas are great, and we have spoken before. What I want to ask you is, in Indian media, we often refer to China as a dragon, and India is referred to as elephant. Between two of them, what is real and what is a myth?
I feel like I covered some of that in the presentation. Chinese success today is honestly just a manifestation of a moment in time. The Americans changed the rules by how the world worked, and that allowed China, which had never really been unified, to suddenly burst forth upon the global stage, because for the first time, it didn't have to worry about resources or market access or capital access or its physical security. And if you remove those four concerns, it's really hard to not succeed. which means that all it takes is the Americans leaving to pull the plug on this whole thing. And that's exactly what's happening.
Right.
But India chose to not participate in that system. For the time of the Chinese rise, 1980 to 2015, that hurt India. But now that the Americans are leaving, India, everything that India has remains intact. All your problems remain intact, but they're problems you know. It's not like the strategic environment for you is changing in a way that penalizes you.
Right. I have a follow-up to that. You have a basic assumption that India will remain a democracy and China will always remain under a communist rule. How confident are you about those assumptions?
I'm not sure I have that assumption. The default status for Chinese government is dictatorial. That takes the form of the Communist Party right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the same form. And if the Chinese Communist Party proves unable of maintaining China's economic position, I have no doubt that the Chinese people will consume it. That doesn't mean that what replaces it will be any better for anyone. Chinese history is very long and very, very, very dark. I am not confident of the next chapter of Chinese politics being better than what they have now. And to a certain degree, the same goes for India. India is not a unitary system, it's federal. And one of the things that has held India back is that
a lot of people don't, let me say like this, all right? And I'm going to include myself in this. In my learning of what things are and understanding what words really mean is a strange way. Like, all right, when you learn the word federal, right, you assume that federal meant U.S. government, right? Because, like, when they talked about, I'm saying, like, the federal police or, they talked about, like the feds, or things of this nature, it's always referring to the U.S. government. But understanding what federal means is a whole different thing, because federal legitimately means that it's a conglomeration of different entities, right? So when you have, like, say like the Federal Express or the Federal Reserve or the federal, like the United States being a federal government, the Australians being a federal government, right? It means that you have a bunch of smaller governments conglomerated into one, right? Because it's something where it's like different states inside of a country, right? And they all have their own power. That's a federal system where, like, you have like a head government, but like it's running a bunch of smaller governments. And that's really what federal means. And it's the same way with the Federal Express or Federal Reserve. Like, Federal Reserve has like different banks throughout, the United States. So like it's a federal bank, right? Where like it has a bunch of different banks under one bank cover, right? So like it's a conglomeration. The same with in Federal Express. Federal Express has a bunch of different hubs in the United States, like all over the country, and they're all conglomerated into one company, right? So it's a federal type of deal. And that's what everybody has to understand, is that some of these words that we speak don't mean what we think they really mean. And that's lesson for today. You know what I'm saying? Like, the more you know.
that the local and the state authorities have just as much power as the national authorities, and sometimes it's hard to get things done. But that also suggests that democracy in some form comes innately to India in a way that it doesn't to most parts of the world, because you're already used to a fairly strict separation of powers. Now, under the current government, things are getting a little punchy when it comes to democracy. There's no doubting that. But I don't see any version of how this evolves that can kind of rein in the regions in any meaningful way. So at a worst case scenario from a democratic point of view, your federalism is fully intact and will survive this. The question is the degree to which you allow traditional democracy to exist within the federal network. And that is a political question that can only be answered at the local level. You can't just have someone at the top by fiat wipe out how you guys manage politics locally.
That's another word that, like, a lot of people don't understand. It's fiat, right? Like, when we talk about fiat money, like, you assume it means money that's worthless. It's not, right? Fiat literally means by decree of the king. So when you talk about fiat, it literally means, like, it's money because the king says it's money. That's important to understand what fiat means. And another one of them words, do.
You have far too long of a tradition, stretching back centuries, for that to happen.
Thanks. I'll take one last question.
Yeah, Peter, thank you very much for giving a great perspective on opportunities and strength India has. And opportunity which I can sum up is first opportunity and strength, you said that we have demographic dividend, which is more than 60% of population is below 30. The second advantage you identified is the location advantage, nobody can take it away. And third advantage which you narrated is that India somehow was not part of that global alliance which happened between 1945 to 2020, let's say. My question is, what are the threats? Because nobody can take away my location advantage, and the global alliance is the past. Can somebody attack my democratic dividend by drugs, by something else? Can you throw some light on this threat to our democratic dividend? People can attack us.
Sure. So pros and cons. Well, actually, this one's a pro and a con. You are urbanizing, which means that birth rates are dropping. And instead of having a pure pyramid, you're now like kind of hollowing out at the bottom a little bit. In the midterm, and by midterm, I mean like 20 years, that's a net plus, because every rupee that you save on not having to care for a child, you can put into higher education and high-powered consumption. In many ways, that's the Chinese story from 1995 to 2015. They had a lot of young adults, but very few children. So those young adults consume just as much as parents would, but instead of spending it on diapers, they spend it on condos. That generates a lot more high-octane growth. India is approaching that moment at the end of this decade, and then it will last for 15 to 30 years based on what happens down below. So your demographic dividend, in a certain way, is actually about to get a lot more powerful economically. Now, if you do what China does, something like one child, and you never regenerate your population base, then 50 years from now, you're screwed. There's a lot of time between now and 2070 for your demographics to round out. So that's a long-term concern, but something you should be aware of. As to things that can actually damage your demographic dividend, drugs won't do it. Honestly, you're a big enough country that a war couldn't do it. And since you're not dependent on international trade for your food supplies or even the supply chains to supply your food supplies, that won't do it. The only concern that I have for taking advantage of your demographic dividend is gender relations. Half your population lives at a lower political level, for lack of a better phrase. I'm trying to be delicate about this. And as long as that is the situation, you're only generating the economic activity of half of what you could do.
That's important. That's very, very important. Understand something. Females inside of the workforce and having females be part of your society fully has literally nothing to do with rights. It has everything to do with your economic standpoint growing. I'm going to say that again. No one really cares about females' economic rights. They care about your females being able to generate revenue for your economy. That's what that's really about in the end of the day. That's an important thing for every one of us to understand as a whole. This is what you're fighting against. This is what it is, because they really don't care. Because like you got to remember, like the market cares about the next quarter. They don't care about 50 years down the road what's going to happen to your society when you don't have any children. Important shit to understand. Let's keep rocking.
So if you can make that cultural jump in a more isolated world, your future is very bright. But you need to mobilize your entire society to do that. India has regional cleavages. That's part of the problem, but it's nothing compared to the situation that you face with gender relations. If you can make your women feel safe and feel like they are right there at the top and making decisions, you will have explosive economic growth and make India a better place at the same time.
Thanks. That's a fantastic point. I have but I think I've run out of time. Do I have some time? Yeah?
All right, that's pretty much the video. Yo, look, you know what I'm saying? It's Tom Pease with Pnoid News. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe on this channel. If you enjoy this content, do me a favor, drop a comment in there and make sure, you know what I'm saying, you let everybody know, you know what I mean, that you like what you're seeing right now. You know what I mean? It's highly important. Anyway, yo, look, I'm going to holler at y'all later. I'm going to go, you know what I'm saying, make some potatoes up and shit for dinner. I'm going to holler. Peace.